Today we're discussing the topic of death, and it's a big one. We have, many ways that we could go about it. And we were talking just before recording about how we don't usually speak about death in society unless it happens to somebody close to us or if we have to. But I'd love to, from a, spiritual perspective. I know this is a big, big topic, but I'd love to hear maybe just what you think, just in like a few sentences, what comes to mind when I speak about death.
Well, two things come to mind. The truth and the illusion. Um, you're right. Like in society, it's something that is usually feared or a taboo, and people try to steer clear from it because it brings up pain or sadness or these memories of loss. And I think, again, that's from a perspective. And from that perspective, then people want to discard it or shun it or close the door on that altogether, just like we do with shadows and our shadow work. It's just a part of us or an aspect of us that we kind of put on the back burner. And just like in that work of healing and unity, it's something that facing our fears is so important to really regain again that union with ourselves, whether it's like an idea or an ideal, or it's really, I think it's a really great subject to talk about today and really dive into, because it's something that people don't discuss. And when it's like we don't know about something or we don't share ideas and thoughts, then it's one of those things that it's a part of us that's missing or incomplete. And so I think bringing that truth to light is a really, really deeply needed conversation.
Go ahead.
That's my perspective. No, that's my perspective on how it is viewed now. I feel like I'm going to go kind of deep here. So if you want to talk
Oh,
about how you see, really?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, go ahead.
So then secondly, when I was a child, like I was so afraid of cemeteries. I was so afraid of the concept of death. I don't know why, if it was because of my empathic abilities. When I would be around it or hear others, I would feel that deep sadness, right? Because I really had never had a lot of death experiences near me or in my family as a child. Nobody close to me had experienced that. So I don't know why I was so afraid of it. And of course, my dad, my lovely dad, as he is, he's one of those types that he's like, oh, you don't know how to swim? I'm gonna push you in the pool. You're gonna learn. So my parents could sense that I was afraid of that. And one day he took me into the cemetery and we just walked, and he talked about it, and they were trying to bring out, that fear, like bring out what to face it, facing the fear. So I wouldn't be, well, it didn't solve anything, but I remembered later in life that, well, I did that. I did do that. And it wasn't as scary as I thought. And actually, now I find a deep peace with cemeteries. Like
Mm.
I find that it's a quiet place, it's a peaceful place, and it's actually very kind of comforting. I don't go there to comfort myself,
Right.
but I'm not, I don't think of it as this like fear wasteland, like with this emotional charge. So I had a near-death experience the last eclipse. What was that, like September or so?
November.
November-ish. Okay, so the fall of last year. And my thoughts on death completely changed. I mean, I felt that I was on the brink of dying. So in that moment, I realized that we don't really die, as spirit. I heard a saying just the other day, and it really helps visualize this of what I'm trying to say. But we're not a spirit in body, but our body is inside our spirit. So if you can like imagine that we are so much larger, like say that we are the air,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or the atmosphere. And then just a part of our aspect is holding on to this like physical plant.
Mm-hmm.
and we're nurturing this plant, and this plant's our body within our spirit, within our soul. We really, our consciousness can expand much further, but right now our attention is here and it's a part of us. So if this plant dies, we're still us. Our consciousness may take another form, another body, if you believe in reincarnation, which I do. Again, so we are eternal and we're just shedding skins. And if we really hold that perspective, that really death is not real. Yes, we are sad from this perspective of losing our identity of things. I feel like that's truly what it is a death of identity because we become so identified with this body, with this being, with other beings, with titles, with names, son, mother, father, family, friend. Those are all identities that really we have taken on in spirit in this incarnation. So like the atmosphere, it's always there, right? Or energy is always there. If you imagine like the sky, one day it's cloudy. So it's identity is bringing up these clouds, right? In that moment, and we can see the clouds, they're there. But when the clouds dissipate, does that mean the sky is not there anymore? Or the same with a rainbow? Rainbows come and go, and we can see them and we see that aspect or that identity of the atmosphere for a moment. But when the rainbow is gone, the atmosphere is still there. And it's like, that's us. We're that eternal. When I had the near-death experience, I could feel my consciousness moving in and out of, I don't know if you could call it like a review of your life, but it was like I was reviewing every person I'd ever met. And it was like my consciousness was going to all those places and it was going throughout space and time. And I just saw everything in this whole life. And then it's amazing how vast we truly are. And we actually are more detached to who we are. We are more in death right now, living our life connected to ego and identity of self than we are if we were to let that go and be in like our true identity of connectedness. That's what I feel. How does that resonate with you?
It really does. Thank you for sharing that. It makes me think that possibly having these beliefs help you not fear death. I'm thinking of somebody that wouldn't share these beliefs, how just I imagine mortified, for lack of a better word, they must be at this idea of death. If you believe that there's nothing after, well, that's kind of bleak, right? I think for me, it would bring up existential crises like every day, right? Like, why am I even here if this is all going to end? But I do share your perspective and your beliefs on this in the sense that we are, and I love the way you pictured it for us, you are this soul that is so much grander than the body. And yeah, for me, it's odd, but the word that comes along with death is freedom. Because I feel like in a sense, and it's like you say, when you are attached to the ego and the material world, you're bound, right? You're not really living. And so in that aspect, you're dead, like what you're saying, right? And the opposite, if you do detach yourself from ego and you try to live your life from that, let's call it 5D, higher dimensions, higher consciousness and love, then you truly are free. And I believe that, our spirit, yes, it is in all dimensions, but I feel like I'm so much more connected to my spirit when I go in that dimension, when I go there. So in this way, I know that when my soul sort of lets go of this body and I move on, that I will be truly free from all earthly, attachments and titles, like you say, and all these things. So it's interesting. You mentioned near-death experiences last year around the eclipse. So
It was a big
that was a
shit.
huge, but I was sort of fascinated with near-death experiences, and I watched way too many people talk about their experiences for my own good, I think. But it sort of made me feel like, well, first of all, it made me not fear death because to me, once you move on and your spirit is free from the body, again, this word, I feel like there's just so much peace and love. It's like, okay, the people that were be left behind will maybe, be sad about my departure. But I think as a soul, there's none of that. There's no sadness on the other side, like, oh, I'm so sad that I died. I don't feel like that's true. I know I don't have any way to prove it because I'm here, but that's what I feel. I feel like once I'm on the other side, it's just like everything is good. And I know
Like,
it's just hard for the people that are behind, that are staying still here, because you're still attached to, like you said, all these titles and to the pain. And I don't want to, say that there is no pain when somebody dies and it's all just like, woohoo, I'm so happy for you, you're moving on. I know there is
yeah.
a lot of sorrow and a lot of pain and sadness, and I would still want to honor that in this discussion. But I also want to bring in more light surrounding the topic of death. Because I think, like you said, the reason why we don't talk about it is because we're scared. And we're also scared to be sad. And we're scared to feel those feelings of grief. So we can put that aside and also speak about the different dimensions or different aspects of death too.
When shifting and you're like, oh, I don't feel all the emotion, it's all good. It's because you are like decluttered, right, from the
Mhm,
attachments here,
mhm.
and you're just more aligned with your authentic self. So you're like, oh, it's like the veil then is definitely lifted, and you know who you are again. So it's more clear, and you are just more at peace because you're more at home, because you're more aligned with who you truly are. It's really hard for us while incarnate to see beyond that veil. We talked about the veil in the last episode, because of the illusions and the ego and the perspectives. And I'd like to say, like, we're not condoning suicide or anything.
Right, right.
We're not so the main that brings me to the main objective. Okay, why are we here really? It is to balance, to remove that veil of identity I feel in that ego, and to use what you said, that attachment to the 5D, to the spirit, to that alignment, and bring it down. We're using these bodies as a grounding mechanism to bring forth and channel these higher energies. We can't do that without a body. We can't do that in the physical realm without action, right? So that's the whole point of, okay, don't be afraid to go beyond the veil, but we can do it while we're incarnate too. And
Mm.
then you do feel a lot less separateness. And especially when you've known people that have moved on, they're right there. You can still talk to them. They're just in a different form, a different consciousness. So really, yeah, really being able to use this, right? We fear what we don't know. So using this knowledge of the beyond to then use your vessel here in the physical, and then channel that, like you said, 5D frequency. I really feel like that's the point. And us being afraid of the unknown and afraid of death, or afraid of what's on the other side of the veil, is only keeping us disconnected. Like I said, we're more dead now if we are holding on to this identity and not connecting to the other side, right? We're
Mm.
not whole. So it's really about merging the two worlds. And then you really know that death is just a word,
Mm.
right? It's
I
not
love that.
real. It's a concept that, yeah, we've discarded for so long. And so we have not been in touch with that aspect of ourselves, and we are not whole. We're feeling that fear, disconnection, sadness, sorrow, frustration. All of those emotions aren't where we're supposed to be resonating either. So again, keeping that disconnected, not embracing that aspect of ourself, that wholeness, is death.
I want to share a quote from Carl Jung in the Red Book. He says, "The knowledge of death came to me that night. I went into the inner death and saw that the outer dying is better than inner death. and I decided to die outside and live within. I turned away and sought the place of the inner life.
I
That's a
love
beautiful
it.
quote. I feel like he's one of the people that really got it. He got what
Yeah,
spirituality was all about and seeking answers within. And like we said, right? The inner death should be more frightening to people than
yeah,
the physical death.
yeah.
And I want to say also, as I'm listening to you speak, it makes me think of just how taboo the whole topic is because, think about it. If you know elderly people around you, or if you're in contact, with them, and hopefully everybody is, it's like nobody asks them, how are they perceiving death? It's like we're all shying away from asking. The most obvious is that they're closer to death than we are, right? And it's like we don't want to go there. We don't want to ask what their perception of this is because we don't want to trigger them or make them sad or whatever. And not all of them are like so, destroyed by it and being so sad. They're like, all right, I know it's coming, la la la. But it's just I feel like nobody wants to have that conversation. We feel so, uncomfortable asking about, hey, what do you think about this?
Yeah, when you bring that up, it makes me realize that as a society as a whole, you notice that we don't even take care of our elderly. We unconsciously or consciously, maybe some people start to just discard the elderly because we are so afraid of coming to terms with the fact that they are closer. And instead of embracing that and embracing them and embracing their experience of coming closer, we shun them, right? Or we disconnect from even them. And it's like they're not even dead yet, but we do that, I think. I think, gosh, we could really see a lot of shifts, and we could see the shift in society of how we treat our elderly, and how we care for our elderly. And when we start to see shifts in that, will show a huge shift in consciousness and humanity,
Mm.
because there's a lot to be said about that, what you just said. There's a lot. And again, if they're living in fear in those last moments, because again, you said some have come to term with it and accepted, oh, it's just going to happen. It's okay. But what if there's a huge group of people that they're just growing in fear every day.
Mm-hmm.
Every day they come closer. And it could be such a different experience for them if one, they knew the truth, or if two, they were embraced by society and their last days were celebrated, or last years were celebrated, or there's just so many different ways we could nurture that aspect, I think. And we as a society are just not, because again, that shows where we are at consciously as a society, like evolution wise. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, what do we discard in life? What do we discard in society? It tells us a lot about where we are.
It's like death is not seen as a profitable thing to think about, right? If you're not thinking about, what to buy next or what your next business move is going to be, then you're not thinking from, that money mindset. And so discussing or speaking about death or being with people that are around, maybe sick or dying, that's just, it doesn't bring any profits to society. And without, going on a tangent again about society and the materialistic ways, I do feel like it's part of that. It's like we are dismissing anything that is not based in materialism or capitalism. And so because elderly people or sick people are actually taking money away from, the governments, right? Because they have to spend money on them. It's like, oh, just like, please, just like sort of put that aside because that's not where I want to put my focus, which is ridiculous. And when you think about just 100 years ago, elderly or just dying were dying at home in dignity, surrounded by their family who could comfort them, like you said, right? And just be there, be present. I don't know why we sort of took this turn. Perhaps it was with, the medical establishment growing or science or whatever, we sort of took that and highly medicalized and highly, we shunned the whole process altogether because it's like too much. It takes up too much of my resources for no profit, and it's just like I don't want to see that, which I find is so, first of all, disrespectful because these people have lived a whole life. Even just
They're like,
if you want to think about profits, they've been contributing to society for their whole life. They were parents and grandparents and all that, and so I think the way that we treat elderly and dying people is so disrespectful. I feel like that's just like bottom line. There's no, in most cases, and I don't want to generalize because I'm sure a lot of organizations out there do great things, but in most cases, they're just sort of tucked away from our view. And
yeah,
there's no dignity in that. Imagine dying. Like I'm thinking about people during
yeah,
COVID times that they died alone in their beds in a residence with nobody there, nobody to explain what was happening. I mean, imagine that. That's insanity. How
yeah.
how did we get there, you know?
I am a firm believer on, someone once told me, and I've just taken this to heart like my whole life. It almost doesn't even matter what we do in all of our life, but it matters the seconds before we die.
Mm,
That emotion, those thoughts, that frequency is what we take beyond us on the other side of the veil. So it's just very crucial, those moments before death. And so
mm,
if you think about like what you're saying, a lot of people, especially probably during COVID, they died in a very strong fear state and pain. The COVID brought up physical pain,
yeah.
of not being able to breathe, or that the aches all over the body. Like it just really did bring out a lot. So I feel just one part of karma is similar to that. When we reincarnate, we're taking that energy from that past, from this life on. So if you imagine, oh God, well that's a horrible state to be having to work with as your ground zero for the
Mm.
next life, starting off in that frequency. But that again is just my perspective and my belief. So I know that it's like, oh, okay, just be zen, be zen. If I know it's coming, I'm just gonna be zen. I'm gonna be in full gratitude, love, and acceptance in that moment.
Stick a post-it. Yeah, I think a lot of and I do hear of people that they know when it's coming. You
Yeah,
hear, I don't know why. How can I say this?
no,
But I feel like you
I
hear
can
about
feel it.
people saying like, I knew that I was dying. Maybe this is in near death experiences videos. I don't know, because I'm like, how can somebody how
Yeah,
can I
this
know
is
this?
definitely
But
a near-death experience topic.
right.
Um, well, I feel like when I had my near-death experience, I thought I was like, I felt it. I felt it. I felt there was a moment I was laying in my bed and I was looking out the window and it was like sunny and bright, and I almost felt like I'd remembered that picture embedded in my mind of like that was the moment I was going to die in this lifetime. Like I was like mixed with seeing the Akashic and seeing the physical, and it almost felt like, yeah, like that's what I remember this moment. This is the moment. Like
Mhm.
that's what I was conceptualizing. And then I don't know how I just bypassed that. But that was a deep, yeah, connection for me. But then even moving past that moment, I was in a lot of confusion. I was in an ungrounded state because I was like, why am I still here? What's going on? But I was getting just grounded. I saw the image of death beside me to my left. I was
Mm.
outside then later on in the garden, and I I saw like this white smoky figure, and it was shaped exactly like death. And I mean, there was maybe a clairvoyant, but I saw it physically as well.
Mm.
And so for that to me, I was like, okay, well then what, are you taking me or not? Like, so I think there's signs. I think we do get signs and images. And again, I don't know how I was lucky enough to bypass that. Maybe it was just, again, many people have these near-death experiences.
Mm.
They're meant to go on and do something else, but they were also meant to have that experience. So maybe it was a wake-up call. Maybe it, shifted my timelines. Maybe I know it has shifted me in my perspective of things. So I think we do know.
if we want to bring this topic more mainstream, what would be your piece of advice for anybody listening that wants to maybe have deeper conversations about this or
I think that this would be a great topic for your conscious chats, your monthly chats. That would be great. But to really look it in the eye, oh gosh, looking death in the eye. Like I said in the beginning, I think that it's really learning to face our fears, whatever that is, and then facing them one by one. Because as you do that, whatever your fear is, it brings you closer to who you truly are. You either embrace that and realize that there's nothing to fear, or you embrace that and you heal that fear and you become more whole. You integrate a part of yourself that you discarded. And I just think along the journey, as you continue to embrace who you are and you allow what you are not to fall away or have the ego death, then you eventually come to that point, yeah, where you then face death in the eye and be like, yeah, I'll make you my bitch. But that's, I think maybe, yeah, that's a step we grow to. And because once you stand fully authentic in who you are, you're not afraid. And that is one of the fears you have to release. All fears must be released because fear is a lower frequency. To get enlightenment, to get to ascended state, to get beyond, to get in complete alignment with your true self, you must release all fears. And death, if that's a big fear, it is a fear that you will face eventually. Learn to face the small things, face them every day, and you will gain in strength. You will grow in who you are, and then you will be able to overcome anything, especially death, because you know it's not real. You come to that perspective of really knowing the truth.
I
And the
love
truth will set you free. You know, I love my Jesus quotes.
that. And free, well, it comes back to what I said about death is freedom to me.
Yeah.
I mean, not that we need to escape here, by the way.
The perspective of
Yeah,
not fearing death is freedom.
that is well said. I want to offer also, you could sort of journal about what you're scared of. What about death scares me? I've been thinking about this, and I think for me, it's like it doesn't scare me, but I know that from my mental, now me, Alex perspective, it makes me sad for my children, you know? I mean, I'm not saying I'm gonna die young, but that's just a part of it that's like, oh, sucks for them to grow with, I don't know how, when I die, but like to be without a mother or things like that. Like that's the only hard part for me.
Burden.
And my husband,
Yeah,
yeah. But for the rest, like for myself, I feel like I've made peace with the whole concept.
I love that. For one, I have children as well. And yeah, I think I am faced with that constantly. Even just yesterday, Archie was crying, like, Mom, I never want to let you go. Mom, can we just live together forever? And that death always comes into mind. Like, wow, he hasn't come to terms with that yet. That how do we prepare our youth today? I think that's a good topic. How do we prepare our youth to really come to terms, accept, and understand it? And if we're afraid of it, how are they going to ever step
Mhm.
into not being afraid of it? So I feel like this is really the next shift too, is I felt called to really help develop Archie in more intuitive ways.
Mhm.
Like, why don't we start teaching them now how to communicate in spirit or communicate telepathy wise? Or, I'm very big on those metaphysical things, anyways, but why don't we let them know that they can talk to us anytime? And so that even when we're not in the physical, we still truly are around them or available to them.
Mhm.
Their guides are available to them. Their higher self is available to them so that they don't live in that fear of death either, of losing us.
Mhm.
So that this is just something that's coming to me recently. So I'm really glad that you said something like that about our children and things like that. So why don't we stop this now and not continue this phase of disconnection? And if we can teach them how to connect now, beyond the veil, they'll also know the truth. They'll be more connected to themselves. We're all really connected. That's the truth. We're all really always connected. There is no loss, but we've experienced that loss because we're disconnected.
I was thinking about how we're also teaching the kids about death and we're not shying away from that topic, especially my oldest. He was like 2 when he was like, what is death? What happens after I die? Big questions. And we can both agree that, there is life after death. So we're teaching about that, about God, about Jesus, about, you will live on and what is spirit? What is your soul, etc. So now the kids, like, they know that when the body dies, the person's spirit goes to heaven, right? And is everywhere, and we can talk to them. So, like you say, I think it's this idea that teaching kids that it's not because the body is dead that the person is like, or their soul rather, ceases to exist. I think that appeases them, in case of, for example, a grandparent dying, they'll know like it's, their body is here and their soul is still with me. So there's that.
Yeah.
And also for their self, their own mortality, right? Like just having this belief from a young age, I feel like is really, like you said, and I think it's empowering too to know. And this brings me to the other thing that I was pondering was how, having this concept of this finite life and knowing that we will move on after death. For me, like I was saying, I was watching too many near-death experience videos. Well, after this sort of going down that rabbit hole, it left me with one question. I was thinking, how can I make this life meaningful? So I feel like by having this idea of death as being only physical, but we survive death in a way, it's sort of okay. So now that I do have this body for a limited number of years, what am I going to do here? How can I make
Yeah.
this life meaningful? Because at the end of the day, that's all there is. I can't just sit here and wait for my death. Like that would be wasting these years and this body that I have. So for me, it's also, it's twofold. It's sort of like looking at death in the eye, like you say, but it's also taking this powerful information that, yes, there is an end and I'm here, right, in the present moment. And what can I do now to make this meaningful and to, serve my purpose? Because I did come here, I believe, for a
Yeah.
reason.
Yes.
So I'm going to use that, right? Use the power of the spirit and higher consciousness and just sort of bring it here now. And what am I doing? Because otherwise it's meaningless to just say that we're coming here for 100 years and we're leaving without any purpose. That's just, to me anyway, it doesn't sound very reassuring. So, I like to believe that we come here for a reason and we have these number of years and let's make the most out of them.
Absolutely. We still chose, yeah, to incarnate for a reason. And it is a limited amount of time. And so each moment is precious. And to see it like that really gives you more purpose to your day to day. Again, not in fear, but in love.
Mm-hmm.
You're embracing love of life instead of focusing on the fear of death.